Start. Okay, start.
Let me just turn on the chat.
We're a little wonky tonight. We got it. It's gonna be good.
You ran here straight from the
This is
signing.
Tyler. If you have not
Hey
seen his
guys.
face, but he is the best assistant in the world. But his computer is not working, and he usually records it, so he's doing some technical wizardry right now. What is this fly we let in? What is that?
It's a big fly.
Anyway,
There we go.
okay, cool. We got the chat. We got everything set up. All the teaching stuff. Oh wow, it's like filling up fast. Man, thank you guys so much for showing up. The yeah, so great topic tonight. I'm really excited about it. It's something that I've been thinking about doing for a while. First of all, a couple really quick thank yous, honestly, to you guys. So first, thank you for showing up in droves to the James Tynan, Josh Hickson signing over in Fourth World. I swung by there, said hello to James really quickly, and Josh, that's my LCS in Smithtown. It was so nice to see people coming out and celebrating all the great work they're doing with the Deviant. And then I went over to Red Shirt here in Port Jefferson, and it was just amazing. It was packed with people. It's a great little local store, and I can't thank you guys enough for showing up, just supporting shops. It was awesome. Also, just for anyone wondering, we got a ton of questions about what is the Black Jacket tier? What is this thing that we mentioned that we're opening? And so the Black Jacket tier, it's open right now. We're probably going to have to close it tomorrow or Friday at the latest. I can only people. So what the Black Jacket tier is if you want to be a paid subscriber and meet with me and talk about your work, or do office hours where we talk about comics, we talk about anything you want, then you can do the Black Jacket tier and essentially for a little bit more money, like you get office hours. And I love the people. I've been meeting with some people for 4 years now, have seen their work go from pitches all the way to finished comics. And some people come and just like to talk about comics they love. We talk about craft, we talk about anything, my work. But it's just there if you want it, no pressure. But we get asked about it a lot. We only open it for a few days a year because I can only manage so much. And if you want to, it's open right now, but we might have to close it as early as tomorrow, hopefully by Friday, the latest. But anyway, it's there. It's in the Best Jacket links. Anyway, so let's do this. I'm really excited. So single issues. So my background, I got into I always wanted to do comics ever since I was little. It's like my McFarlane page I've told you about since I was 13. Like it's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be a comic book artist and writer. Um, but when I realized I wasn't good enough at the art part of it, I didn't know how to break into comics, like comic writing. And so I wound up getting more into fiction. And the genre that I fell into with fiction that I really love was short stories. So for me, that medium, telling a story in a really brief period of time, is like really close to my heart. It's my first book ever published as a short story collection, Voodoo Heart from Random House. This like, and it's the medium that I like swam in for many years before I broke into comics itself. And I love the art form, like doing something really succinct, telling something that has a beginning, middle, and an end, all of it being something that fits into some tiny uh, really contained space. Tyler is just running out of the studio because his iPad it wasn't able to be muted. And um, the other thing about it, other than it just being the medium that I began in, is that it's also like the format that most of you guys, if you are aspiring creators, will have your first shot at. Like, when I got my very first gig, wasn't an 8-page story in an anthology. It wasn't 3 issues. It wasn't like a gig on Batman or any of that stuff. It wasn't creator owned. It was a one shot. That both places, DC offered me one, Marvel offered me one. So the very first thing I ever wrote was a one shot for Marvel when they were trying to sort of reinvent some of their very earliest characters. and it was about the original Human Torch, Johnny Hammond. And that so the reason I think it's such a crucial kind of uh, sort of skill to learn is that it's probably going to be your first job. You know, they'll try you on a one shot before they'll try you on almost like, any kind of series or anything like that. So being able to tell a story in 20 pages or 22 pages and just get beginning, middle, and an end is key. And so one of the things I wanted to do today is walk through sort of a structure that I believe in as a kind of core story skeleton, and then kind of show you how that works as a kind of a guide for how to do the kind of beginning, middle, and an end in multiple, one shots that I love. And what we're going to do as we go through it isn't just like look at conventional ones, like ones that genuinely have a linear storytelling structure from beginning, middle, and an end. But what we'll do is we'll look at ones that have that, but to fit into a 20-page structure, rearrange it. So one of the hardest thing about doing a story in such a short space is the compression. Sometimes you don't have time for the connective tissue that you would have over 2 issues, 3 issues, 6 issues. And yet you're still being asked to do something that generally fits in kind of a 3 to 6 issue arc all in one issue. And so we're going to look at the tricks, the kind of craft and technique, gimmicks, things that you can do to sort of cut out the parts that you don't need, different ways of approaching storytelling so that you can still get a full 3 act structure, a full beginning, middle, and an end in a story that's that short, no matter what. Okay. So that's the goal. We're going to look at a few and talk about that. But as a primer, some people who've been in the class a while have heard me talk about this, probably not in a year or 2 years. I'm not sure. Maybe about a year. But 3 act structure is kind of the skeleton that I use to map out my story. So let me just sort of give you like a bit of a primer on what I'm talking about. Everybody has like everyone that that writes comics and stuff has their own process, their own format for how they kind of measure how a story is going emotionally for their characters. Some people use the kind of save the cat method. There's a famous book called Save the Cat. Some people use the Robert McKee story method where there's different points of story. Some people use the hero's journey, the Joseph Campbell method that you see in Star Wars, where it's they're all different guides, and you can pick whichever one you like. You can have your own. But what I'm saying is that most writers have one that they use in some way to kind of measure the emotional arc of their characters, of what's happening in the story emotionally to their protagonist. And you kind of pick whichever one is most useful to you. There's hundreds of them out there, dozens of them out there, really, that are respected and used in different ways. But it's sort of a protractor to look at your storytelling from a character standpoint, not from a plot standpoint. That's one of the key things to understand. Okay. So for me, I use a really basic one that I learned when I was a teenager and trying to sort of study, story structure before the internet, before there were so many, before there was so much material on it. I used to study screenplay books because I felt like those were really tutorial. Fiction books, often about writing a novel or writing short stories, weren't technical enough for me at that time. I was a kid and I wanted the nuts and bolts. I wanted to understand, how do you do a great opening? How do you do a twist? How do you do, and most fiction books at that time, at least, were about like, finding inspiration, following your inspiration, being, they were more abstract. And so I'm a big fan of learning nuts and bolts craft storytelling. If this is your first class, and we have a lot of new people, like more people than we usually have, because it's, again, free and open to everybody. What the class is about is trying to sort of give you all the tools a month by month of comic storytelling and allowing you to do whatever you want with them, but showing you the kind of effects of each applied or applied craft technique. So if we talk about flashbacks one month, it'll be like, here's how a flashback can work. here's different versions of the effect of that thing. And you use it how you will in your story. So here, what I'm saying is the macro version of that is saying one tool I use to measure how a story is going is 3-act structure. That's how how I can tell when I look at how I'm pacing a story, is this tale, like, is this narrative hitting the beats that are emotionally resonant for my main character? Okay. So I'm going to pull up, let me do this. I'll pull up, I'm going to download this and then share my screen. You're going to have to deal with this. We're really DIY today. Here we go. I got it. I'm going to share my screen. And now I have it's my whole screen. So you're just going to get everything hanging out. My cluttered desktop, all of it. It's okay. Here you go. Can you see it? Go in your computer.
Yep. No.
Can you guys see it? I'm going to the chat. Yes, awesome. Okay, great. Here we go. So you can even see the little water stains on this that I drew myself. This little mat that I drew myself. So, okay, for those of you unfamiliar, what 3-act structure is it's kind of again, like a guideline that people that write, especially screenplays and write for film and TV use, but I use, and a lot of people use for fiction as well, to chart the emotional progress of your main character, right? So if you think about it as a 120-page story, okay, like, so about a 2-hour movie, a 6-issue arc, because 20 pages an arc, right? An issue, so 6 issues, 120 pages. If you think about it as that kind of first big volume, right, the first movie of your story, then you have kind of 30 pages or 30 minutes, 60 minutes, and 30 minutes. So 120 minutes, it's a movie, again, a movie sort of guide, right? Act 1 is 30 minutes, that's green. Act 2 is yellow. Act 3 is red. There are a couple points in 3-act structure that you generally hit. And you can kind of almost do it with any movie. Again, this is Western culture storytelling. There's other forums around the world that kind of espouse different priorities. But for most kind of Western storytelling, Hollywood novels, all that kind of stuff, it follows generally this kind of guide. So your main character, what happens is this part here from the very beginning of the story, for the first 15 minutes or so of the film, for the first issue or so of a 6-issue series, okay, you're going to show what they're going through, who they are, given the thing you're about to confront them with. So, for example, it doesn't mean just like if you're Spider-Man, you're a good guy and you save people. It means in this story, you're Spider-Man and you're wondering about your purpose. You're wondering, are you doing the right thing? And then the inciting incident, I comes in at about 15 minutes to 20 minutes in a movie, but about sort of towards the end of the first issue in some way, if you're doing a 6-issue arc. And what it does is it presents something to your main character that offers the challenges the way they see things and gives them sort of the possibility of doing a new path, whether that path is because they're facing hardship, whether it's an opportunity like something they've always wanted, but something comes in to change their life and offer them a new road somehow. And then for this part, they usually struggle with whether or not they're going to follow that thing. And by the end of the first 30 minutes, they decide they are. And then this part is the rising action, the main character facing escalating challenges. And about halfway through the movie or halfway through the arc, they usually face something that makes them feel like there's no turning back if they go further. So this is the moment in like something like Titanic, right? Where Rose and Jack decide that Rose decides, because she's the main character, that she's going to run away with him. It's the first time they sleep together. It's exactly at the midpoint of the movie. And that she's going to leave her family and forget about them. There's no turning back. Plot wise, it's also the moment in that movie when the boat hits the iceberg. But we've done a class, if you want to watch it and go back and see, about emotional conflict versus plot conflict. But when it comes to 3-act structure, the thing to keep in mind is it's always character, it's always emotion, it's not plot at all. So the iceberg in Titanic, what's happening to the boat doesn't matter. It's only the Rose's journey. The inciting incident in that movie, if you're curious, if you want to go back and track it, this is Rose struggling with the fact that she is about to get married to Billy Zane and doesn't want to. This is her meeting Jack after she is about to kill herself. And this is where he invites her down under the to the lower decks to join him. And this is everything to the point they sleep together. Here, the next part of it is the rising, now that you've made the choice that you can't go back from, the story continues to a point where it feels like the hero has lost everything and has made the wrong decision. This usually happens about 90 minutes into a 120-minute film, 4.5 to 5 issues into, or 4 issues, let's say, into a 120-page book. And when that happens, they feel like there's no going forward. Everything seems stacked against them. And then they turn it around for whatever reason. They decide they're going to go forward. And then you get to the climax where they face their biggest fear. They overcome it or they lose, and you get your denouement. So this structure, as mechanical as it sounds, isn't just like, it's not just, nuts and bolts. And one thing I want to say to you guys, like anyone out there, is that sometimes people take, I remember the criticism of sometimes people take classes about how to write, fiction or comics or screenplays. And the big worry is almost that, what'll happen is that you'll learn the mechanics of storytelling and that it'll make it less magic. And the thing that I'd say to you is that for me, I think a lot about something my wife told me when she was starting medical school. She was in her first year. And hang on, let me tell Tyler one quick thing. So the first year my wife was in, he made cookies and they're really good, is what I was basically saying. But anyway, and other things. But my wife, the first year she was in medical school, you do gross anatomy, right? So you dissect the dead body for the whole year, and it's grim and all of that. And so I kept thinking about like how do you go through that and then like look at the human body, look at people alive, and not just think, it's all mechanics, right? It's all just meat and bones and blood and like just just science and physics. Like, how does it not take away all the wonder? And she was saying to me, like, when you see a dead body, sure, like that's how it feels. But when you're in the operating room and you see someone's heart pumping, like a live heart, there's no way to describe how, even though you understand everything that's happening, there's still a wonder to it and a magic in looking at life and realizing like you have no idea what that thing is. Like, how does it, how it works, but you're experiencing it, and it's still mystical, as corny as that sounds. And that's the way I really feel about about learning how fiction works, whether it's in comics or screenplays. Or I love dissecting it. I love taking it apart because it doesn't diminish it at all for me. It just makes me more appreciative of when it's working that way, like that beating heart. Like I read Ultimate Spider-Man today, or I read um, Absolute Wonder Woman and Martian Man, like the books and you read these things and you're like, I know what you're doing, and yet there's still magic to it because when it works, it just becomes something transcendent. So don't worry about that if that's anything that occurs to you as somebody new taking a writing class. Like, again, taking apart an amazing piece of machinery doesn't make that thing any less wondrous when you see it working and being alive. But so this structure is what I use to measure from all the way back from like Black Mirror and Court of Owls all the way to now with Absolute Batman. Okay. So what I'd say is like, for me, it's just a couple key points. It's at the beginning of the story, you're presenting us with the character in a way and seeing what they're going through and in the specific realm of what they're about to face. So again, Batman isn't just being awesome in Court of Owls at the beginning. Batman is being overconfident and acting like he knows the city better than anyone, and it's all him, and nothing can challenge him. And that sets up the challenge of the Court of Owls, saying you don't know the city at all. And when you read Jason Aaron's Thor, for example, it's not just Thor being awesome at the beginning. It's Thor feeling like gods are untouchable and enter the God Killer, right? So it's showing your character in a way that's going to be contrasted with the thing they're facing in the conflict of that story. Do you guys know what I mean? Just put it in the chat if you're following me so far in that. Okay, awesome. All right. So with a one shot, and then from there again, from that point forward, they resist or they accept, and when they resist the call to action or the inciting incident, you have someone who's like, I don't know if I should do this. When they don't, and somebody's standing in their way, you have something more like Moana, who really wants to go out on the ocean, but you have a person stopping them, like her father. Disney movies follow these very, very closely, but like put something in the chat just for fun. Put a movie in the chat that we've probably seen. You can list them. Jaws. Okay, yeah. I mean, The Hobbit, Die Hard, perfect, right? So Raiders of the all of those follow them. Lord of the Rings, Matrix follows it 100%. Matrix, you're seeing Neo being, unhappy with his life at the very beginning, and what happens? He gets a message from the White Rabbit. That's the inciting incident. He follows it, he goes down, and then he's invited by Trinity and them to join the group and understand what the Matrix is. What do you do? That's the beginning of Act One, right? All of it. It follows it. John Wick follows it perfectly. Was it like Superman? Like all like these movies. If you Logan follows it exact. What do you think the inciting incident is in Logan? Put it in the chat. Yeah. Well, what's the inciting incident? Not meeting her yet. Yeah, it's when the mom comes to him, or the woman that's watching Laura comes to him and says, "I need your help." Right, the lady meeting him. "I need your help. I know who you are." That's the inciting incident. When the end of Act One is when he decides he's going to do that thing. He goes after the people attack the whatever the what are they, the Marauders, the yeah. Um. Anyway, Morbius. I haven't seen Morbius. I'm not doing that one. I'm sure it follows three act structure, but I'm not morbing on that one. And sometimes if you say to me, like, what I'd say to you is, if you pick a movie that's Morbin time, yes. If you see a movie like The Godfather follows it closely, uh, yes, like all these. So if you see a movie, and some people will say to me, like, what about Reservoir Dogs or Pulp Fiction or Memento or movies that go in a different order? And I've said this, but so if people have been in the class a long time, they'll know what I'm about to say. But I think it's a core lesson, which is that when you see something like Pulp Fiction, which is really startling, in terms of its structure, what you start to realize is that it's doing one of two things. Like Avengers does one of these things as well. Avengers Endgame, and sometimes the three act structure is told over multiple characters. So one character will experience the inciting incident, another character will experience the beginning of Act One, and it's still fulfilling because it's one story being told through multiple people. The second thing, what?
Sorry, making myself a moderator on this. Sorry, keep going.
The the second thing is the other way to do it is to do something that's structurally really different, but you're hitting all the beats in different places. They're just rearranged. So Reservoir Dogs is a really good example, and Pulp Fiction of movies that cut up three act structure and move those pieces around. So the beginning of Reservoir Dogs happens at the into Act Two, and then what happens when he tells Harvey Keitel who he is, whatever, that it's all cut up, but all of the core beats are there, and that's why it's satisfying ultimately, is you're getting the story. And Memento similarly, you're just getting it in a different order. Okay, so let me just show you what I'm talking about with now that we kind of look at three act structure in this way. Like Die Hard, again, it's easy. Die Hard isn't, again, and the thing I really caution you about, because this is the thing that people really fuck up sometimes, and I spend a lot of time fucking up, so just bear with me, is that plot isn't character, right? So the inciting incident is the only moment in the entire three act structure when something happens that isn't character first, like isn't the character's decision. It's the only moment when something happens that enters their life and they accept they have to deal with it. Everything else is them acting, right? Even the all hope is lost. They try something and it doesn't work. Okay. So the inciting incident is the only moment of plot in the whole thing. So in Titanic, for example, just because I was talking about that before, the inciting incident is her meeting Jack. The act one is when she decides to go with him. Point of no return is when she says she's leaving her husband, her fiance, and going with him. The all hope is lost is when she feels as though he's betrayed her, that he took the jewel thing and that he's not who he said he is, and that. The plot, the boat hits the boat hits the iceberg, the boat is sinking, they have to get on a lifeboat. None of that matters to the three act structure. The whole story of Titanic could take place before it hits the iceberg. And I'm not saying it would be better or worse, or I mean, it'd be worse, but like, I'm not saying it would be the same. But when you're thinking about three act structure, you're thinking about the character's emotional moments, not what's happening in the bigger picture. Not sometimes those things are really wedded, like in Titanic, they're perfectly wedded. In a big blockbuster, the biggest plot moments happen alongside the biggest character moments, and they just hit you to make that thing explode. So not only does she meet Jack, but she's about to kill herself and whatever. Not only does she go see Jack, but she goes down and meets, like, everybody down. It's a huge dent. Not only does she sleep with Jack and decide, I'm not going back there, but the boat hits an iceberg at that exact moment. And so it's sinking. And so everything converges to say, I can't turn, there's no going back. The boat's sinking, right? Not only does she feel like, oh, Jack betrayed me and he isn't who I thought he is, she also thinks, we're going to die. Like the whole boat is sinking and my only chance is to go on a lifeboat or, that. And she refuses that. So the plot is the stakes of the emotional conflict. That's it. The plot is how dramatic you want to make the emotional conflict and this three act structure in a giant bombastic way. You could make Titanic a very quiet movie, honestly. It could all take place before there's any impact with the ice. Or it could be even more crazy. The whole thing could happen afterward. Who knows? But I'm just saying, like, the plot is not that. Okay. So how do you tell a story with all of this in it? Let's take a look, okay? Like, but the idea is you get all of these emotional beats in some way or other, right? So I'm gonna pull up, you move three act structure aside, and I'm gonna pull up Daredevil first because it has the whole thing in one thing.
It's Christmassy.
And it's Christmassy. It is. All right, now I have my whole screen again with all my stuff. And there we go. And these are all my tabs of crazy stories and stuff. There's a tab of Absolute Batman 4. I'm almost going to show you. I can't show you. I won't do it. Okay. So with this story, if you haven't read it, what I'll always do is, I know not everybody has all the time in the world. Let me take a sip of water. Not everybody has all the time to read everything. So I'll recap it a little bit. So don't worry about it. Tyler and I are eating Christmas cookies for dinner because we went to the signings instead. Is everyone following? Is this a good pace for everyone too? Just let me know. You can say, like, Scott, this isn't working. You got to go slower. You got to go faster. I want to hear from everybody. You know what I mean? That's it.
Yes.
Awesome. I just want to make sure, like, I want this class, the goal of this class is not for me to like spout at you the whole time. The goal of the class is for you guys to leave feeling empowered as aspiring writers, always. So if I'm not doing something that's making you feel like, holy shit, I just learned a tool that I can use, whatever. I'll do one more three act structure for you just so you understand again, like, if you go see Avengers Endgame, Tony Stark is the main character in that. If you see Avengers Infinity War, Thanos is actually the last character in that, main character in that. But other characters get some of the beats. Captain America might get the end of Act One, but the person that gets the most in each of those is Tony Stark in Endgame, and that's like But when you see a conventional film like Spider-Man: Homecoming, you'll see like inciting incident, Peter. It's very obvious, okay? But like Die Hard, because somebody mentioned it, right? It's like, again, separating plot from plot from Emotion, what Hans Gruber and them are doing is never the beats. The inciting incident might be the building is attacked, right? Because that makes John realize I have to save my wife, you know. But the emotional conflict, the three act structure is always about John and his wife. That's it. It's about him reconciling with his family. So the beginning of that movie, all it is it's showing you John McClane as someone estranged from his wife, trying to make it up. The whole talk with Argyle, all that stuff. Yeah, that's who he is. This is what he's here for. He falls apart with his wife, and then all of a sudden there's a terrorist attack. Now he has to get back. So the whole thing is him trying to get back to her, trying to reconcile with her, and that. So the point of no return in that movie is like it follows it like that. So what I'm trying to say to you is each of the inciting incident, sorry, each of the beats or the moments in a 3 act structure like that is about John making decisions to try and get his family back, not the building's going to blow up or any of that stuff. Do you know what I mean? If you follow movies, like, again, if you want like a primer on it, just watch some movies, watch Terminator, watch like, Disney movie, watch Tangled, watch like any of those, anything like that. That's a straight ahead linear movie. And you'll see like Disney movies are perfect for it. Inside Out, all of it. Like they're really straightforward. Like, again, if you watched, and we don't have to dwell on it, but I hope that makes sense in general. Okay. So the inciting incident is the only moment where we don't rely on our character's agency. Yes. Something comes into their life that surprises them. Treasure map, or oh my God, the island is dying, or hey, you didn't know this, but your father was a superhero and you're supposed to be too, or a meteor crash lands, or you get an invitation to Dinosaur Island, or like that's the moment when something comes to your character's life that is essentially a representation of all the things they've hoped for or fear, and is inviting them forward into the adventure. You know what I mean? Exactly. Okay, so let's take a look. So I can show you, we can do a class. I don't know if I've done a class about building arcs. Did I do one about arcs?
We talked about it. I don't think it's been the focus of class.
I can do one where, because people are asking me, how do you break it over 6 issues? I can show you, but like, if an issue is, the reason that people kind of work arcs about 6 issues or 12 issues and break it 6 is in the midpoint, is because trades, for collectibles, like collectible editions, they usually can fit about 5 to 6 issues in a trade. So publishers generally want you to do an arc that's about that length, or double that so they can do, or 3 times that so they can do volume 1, 2, 3, or just do, whatever diagonal line you're doing. But if you're going to shape it that way, it's kind of like that. So in a movie, again, I try and think in 12 issue arcs. Like Absolute Batman is about 13 issues, 14 issues for its first big year. And it has 3 contained arcs, like 3 acts. So we're in the first act now. It's all about sort of, Bruce. Well, I mean, like the first act, it really is like the secret of the series is that Bruce is the main character. Like he goes through everything, and but the first one is the first arc is told more from Alfred's point of view. So it's almost like I use Alfred to do the 3 act structure sort of beats of the first arc, the inciting incident, meeting Batman, and the whole like, what do I do? Do I stay here and abandon him, or do I try and help? And then in the second arc, it becomes Bruce as the main character in that way, and so forth. But it follows that structure all the way through. But it gets all the way to about what'll be about issue 14, 15 as the kind of 120 page movie script type thing for that length, even though it's double that at that at comic length. So anyway, okay. All right, so let's look at Daredevil, right? If you haven't read it, I'll give you a quick recap. So it features, and I don't want to make you dizzy, but it's Daredevil. Matt Murdock is taking some underprivileged kids on a trip, on like a trip out to see the mountains and the snow and the Catskills, and to get them out of their zone and to let them enjoy the kind of winter wonderland for Christmas. And as they're going, He's there, and all of a sudden, as he's they're all of a sudden a deer runs out in front of the bus. The bus flips, and the kids are really badly hurt. The driver is killed. Okay. Now we can skip this for a minute because I'm going to come back to sort of how you use a flashback. But what happens is Matt wakes up. He realizes the driver's dead. The kids are going to freeze. They're in the middle of nowhere, and he decides he has to kind of keep them going, right? So he starts to tell them like, you got to stay happy, you got to think about yourselves, and he tries to be the daredevil that's going to kind of keep them cheerful, keep them not thinking about like the death. And as they go forward, he gets weaker and weaker because he's been really hurt in the accident. So they go and he walks them through the snow. He makes them think about Christmas lists, all this stuff. And eventually what happens is he keeps going without going too fast and making anyone dizzy, is he collapses. He passes out. He thinks that he can save them. He can't. He passes out. And what happens is when he wakes up, they are dragging him. Okay. They've actually saved him. And he's always telling them up to this point, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Okay. And what he's talking about is himself. I'm not afraid because when I'm not, the way I'm not afraid is that I help other people. I'm someone who gets scared. But the way I avoid that is by, thinking about others. And meanwhile, he's telling these kids throughout, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. And it's not until he passes out that they're absolutely unafraid because they're afraid the whole time he's telling them, don't be afraid. Until suddenly when he passes out, they suddenly step up and they start taking him forward and they're fearless. Okay. And then when he gets them back, he's really proud of them for all this. And that's the idea. Very simple story. Okay. So starts off, and what I'm going to show you is like here, you start to see it's linear structure. If you want like perfectly linear, not perfectly like a perfect story, but something that has no flashbacks, no anything, you can read my first issue ever that I ever wrote, The Human Torch. We included it in the Dropbox. Everything goes forward in that. Everything is forward moving. This is very close to that. But instead of teaching my issue, I thought we'd use this. But there is one flashback. So let's go back. Right? So in the flashback, Matt is doing a big holiday party. He's trying to be big and happy and all of this. Everybody come here, right? And like,
And he's not Daredevil.
and he's not right. He's not. He's saying he's not Daredevil, and he has uh, uh, an interaction where it feels like essentially he's trying to be friendly, but he talks about why it matters to him to take these kids out, right? So he gets invited out on a date, and he says, like every year about this time, I take the Greek skills students up on a field trip. Just the problem kids, the ones who are most anxious about the outside world, getting them out of their comfort zone for a day or two gives them a chance to experience things and find out it won't hurt them. You know what I mean? So he goes in, and then here he is. So if you were doing the story linearly, the story would begin here and then would go to the bus. And then, so this is Matt. This is the beginning of 3 act structure. Okay. This is the first part where what it's showing you is Matt is hoping to show these kids to be not afraid and not anxious, that the world is, okay, and that they can make it through. Okay. This is minutes 1 to 15 of that movie. The story starts right at the inciting incident, which is what? The crash, right? The crash. So the car crashes. He passes out. When he wakes up, Matt realizes, I've got to keep going. I've got to get them somewhere. That's the end of Act 1. Matt goes. And as he's going forward, sometimes you can skip. You don't need everything, every single beat of a 3 act structure. You don't need the point of no return. You don't. Some stories have it. Like I have it in Human Torch. This generally has it, but you don't need everything. But the one you follow sort of the general flow of that, right? So here, this is Act 1 into Act 2. This is where the conflicts get bigger. It's getting colder. The kids are getting scared. Here you get to the all hope is lost when he thinks that they're going to be saved, right? he makes the decision that the only thing to do, this is the point of no return. The only thing to do is not to go back up, but to try and find some way forward to keep safe and to keep going and not turn back to the road.
He also like thinks he loses one of the kids at one point.
He thinks he loses one of the kids, right? And he finds them. But the point of no return is that decision. So this has basically every beat too. And then the point of no return is here where he feels like, you know what, I think I can save them. Hey, he sees somebody, he tries to get them, they yell for help, he thinks that he's going to get saved, and instead he can't do it and he passes out and they leave and he's stuck. That's the all hope is lost, right? That's sort of where it's like, what am I going to do? Well, he wakes up and he realizes this is sort of the climax that what he has taught them, or the thing that he has been saying to us, thinking of others is the way you be fearless, is what they're doing. He did instill in them that idea, even if he didn't know he did. And so they're helping him. It has everything in it. You see what I mean? It has one little bit that's in the past that gives the beat that can't quite fit in a linear story this way. Okay. But it follows a very linear 3-act structure. Now, some stories you'll feel as you're telling them, I can't fit all this. It doesn't work right, you know? And so it's not fitting. So you think of other techniques to do that. Okay. So let's look at a different one. But do you see what I'm saying? Again, if you want me to go, I didn't want to go through Human Torch, but Human Torch goes very, very, I was very nervous and structural at that time as my first comic. So everything is really on the nose. It's like inciting incident, end of act one, point of no return where he goes out without his skin. All hope is lost when everyone turns on him and he thinks he's a monster. But no, I'm going out there. And then Eleanor shows up and tells him, you're not a monster. You saved me. And I know from monsters. And he's like, okay, beginning of act 3, he goes to save the blimp of Warren Worthington and so on. And, very, very, very structural. Okay. But what if, you just feel like I have this big story and I don't know how to fit it? Okay. Well, what you do is you can find other ways of getting all these beats in there without telling them in a linear fashion. Okay. So let's move to one that feels almost like it's linear, but it's actually pulling a trick. Okay. So let's look at here. We can do the Spider-Man issue by Chip, written and drawn by Chip. Oh my God.
Oh, the cover by Ship too.
Too talented, that man.
You're gonna be on his comic news magazine, right?
I am on. Yes, I'm on his. On the cover, and he wanted to do an absolute version of me where I was like super jacked, like drawn, whatever. And I wanted him to use that, but he used the normal one where I look like this. Yes, Brian. Do you have something you wanted to ask? And if anyone wants to ask anything in the chat, we can try and stop and see.
Do you have multiple inciting incidents?
I mean, I don't know. I haven't. I can't think of anything that has multiple inciting incidents. Like, if you're thinking of something that you think has them, you can tell me, and I'll try and figure out if there is one, as opposed to multiple ones.
I mean, there'd be larger inciting incidents, smaller ones, like an event comic where you have different locations with little different.
It's still one thing.
Yeah.
It really is like the key to it is like what I would think about it as is like a really basic guideline for what your story is about emotionally, right? So if you're thinking about John Wick or whatever, or you're thinking about, Inside Out 2 or like anything, when you go watch some movies or read some comics, like, all of it. But movies, it's a fun exercise because you can watch it with other people, whatever. But when you do it and see what is the inciting incident in Star Wars, what is, like the New Hope, what is the inciting incident in uh, uh, you know, the Robert Pattinson Batman? What is it like? What is the end of Act 1 where he decides, oh, I'm going forward? Is the movie structured in a way where we're already in Act 2, and then it shows you what happened in Act 1 in flashback, such as some things like Batman Begins has a structure that's interesting in that way. Toy Story, that's great. Buzz shows up. That is exactly that's the inciting incident in Toy Story. You guys are totally getting it. Do you know what I mean? It's exactly that. Woody is confident. Woody feels he's he's the favorite toy, and all of a sudden here's Buzz. That's the inciting incident, right? End of Act One, Toy Story, when he goes after Buzz. You know what I mean? So yeah, it follows anyway. All right, so let's look at Spider-Man. Spider-Man pulls like a trick, but it's also interesting. So with this, Spider-Man, and again, like I would really encourage you to read Chip's Run. It's great. But it starts with this kind of documentary about asking people what they think about Spider-Man. Excuse me, let me just take some water. And you get all these different testimonials. They're funny, they're poignant, they're different thing. And then there's this mom who's like, I'm sorry, Spider-Man? Spider-Man is amazing. And then all of a sudden you see Spider-Man, in a classic Spider-Man thing, he's tracking down criminals. He goes after them. He gets there before the cops. He stops them, and he's really, wisecracking. One of the themes of the whole issue is that nobody wants like Spider-Man's jokes. He won't shut up. He just keeps talking and keeps gabbing at people. Anyway, he takes down the two criminals, and then he sees a kid who's running away, and the kid is just a lookout for the other two criminals. And he's like, please, please don't, whatever. And Spider-Man has mercy on him. See? And he's crying, oh my God, my mom, whatever. And Spider-Man hides him. And it's like, oh, he got away. You realize this is his mom. His mom is talking about how he was going to be lookout for these two guys, and Spider-Man saved him. And I'll always be thankful for that. Now it goes back into the testimonials. Some people like him, some people don't like him. There's funny about his web smell and so on. And now we get like the testimonial about how he eats hot dogs from this guy. He saved this guy's life, and the guy offered him free hot dogs for life. Now Spider-Man gets hot dogs every day and just talks and talks and talks, and he's like exhausted by it. And then eventually it comes back to her, right? And so she goes one night, she goes in to check on her son, and look who's tutoring him, Spider-Man, right? The Pythagorean theorem, this, that. It's so touching. I love it, right? And then you get more people. Spider-Man is a great man. Spider-Man's a joke, so on. And then it comes back, okay, to her. And this is really painful, where it's like the two guys that Spider-Man nabbed blamed her son for getting them caught, come back and kill the son. Spider-Man comes to the window, goes to see him, and he's gone, rings the doorbell, realizes what happened, hugs her, goes after them. And this is reminiscent of how he goes after the guy that kills Uncle Ben, right? It has the same choreography as the original Spider-Man comics.
He's scary here.
Yeah, he's angry. And he gets them, ties them up, and then you see him crying. And then here, we look up above at the guy swinging on the threads, and it's hard to think of him as a person, but he is. I've seen Spider-Man. I know Spider-Man. He's just a guy who wants to help. And he helped my boy. And he helped us. He really did. But my boy Kyle, he's gone, I think we should all be more like Spider-Man. Really, I'm so moved reading this. And then here's the guy making the documentary. Colin, come on, you were supposed to be out of here an hour or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, let me save it, whatever. He saves it, he leaves. Hey, and there's Spider-Man, right? Word on the street is you're making a documentary on me. And then he's like, I just wanted to make sure it's not about me being a menace or whatever or that kind of thing. And he's like, no, not exactly. And he's like, and what you realize is he, as a kid, was nearby an incident where Spider-Man took down Doc Ock, got his shirt all dirty, and Spider-Man pulled his own school clothes, Peter Parker clothes, out of his backpack and gave them to him because he had a job interview, or he had a date, sorry. And he was like, and I realized wearing your clothes, you were just a kid like me. And he's like, so
old-fashioned taste.
Right, old-fashioned taste, yeah. And he's like, how'd you hear about my documentary? And then you realize the same kid interviewed Peter Parker because he took pictures of him about Spider-Man, and it ends on Peter Parker's talking about Spider-Man. And he's like, well, he's never going to stop. He's just trying to do the best he can. And that's the whole thing. Amazing, beautiful story. I love this story. I would study it as a one shot. Now, the interesting thing, okay, about it is it has the 3-act structure in it, but it's not told linearly, even though it kind of appears to be, because it follows what happens with Kyle. right? Where is it being told from? You could say in the chat, whatever. The ending, the editing room, the end. It starts at the end. What does this give you? This framework of being able to do interviews like this. It gives you the mom's perspective. Exact. It also it allows you to create an elliptical structure where you cut out everything you don't need. Because if you told the story linearly, it would take at least 2 issues. Okay. It would be Spider-Man. It would be too corny if you did. Imagine the story with no editorial, you know, I'm saying a piece of cookie. Um, no documentary interviews. It will be Spider-Man goes after the criminals. Spider-Man saves Kyle. Spider-Man does something else and then winds up deciding he's going to help Kyle. Spider-Man goes to tutor Kyle, sees him doing well, goes to talk to Mary Jane or whatever, goes back, or Aunt May, if it's not Ultimate, and then goes back and finds Kyle dead, and then goes after the guys. And you can think about, imagine without that, you put those scenes next to each other, they'd feel incredibly rushed, incredibly compressed. Wouldn't work. It would just feel like you're telling the story in a way that has no emotion. You'd need a longer thing. So if I said to you, hey, listen, you've got to do, um, you know, this epic story I just told you about, but do it in 20 pages. How do you do it? Well, you start from a core emotional point on that 3x structure map, and you make everything else backstory in some way. You make everything else fit around that. So where we are in the story is essentially the climax. If the whole thing is about, are you doing the right thing, Spider-Man? What is Spider-Man? The actual climax of the story would be Peter Parker deciding, am I doing the right thing or not? And you're starting at the point that he's about to be interviewed. So you're starting right before the climax, and you're filling in everything that got you there as you go in the drumbeat to that moment. You understand? I'll give you another example here. So what I'm saying is, if you start from, there's another way you could, let's talk about, you know what may be helpful. Let's talk about other ways you could tell this story. If I said to you, you have 3 issues, you could tell it linearly. If I said to you, you have 8 pages, how would you tell it? Right? If you only had 8 to 10 pages, the only way to tell a story like this would be to entirely cut out the videography stuff. You wouldn't have room for it, right? But if you wanted to tell a story about how Spider-Man saved somebody that died and still decided to keep going, you could do it in a way where the whole thing took place from Spider-Man going to the door to say, how is Kyle? And going up the stairs with his mother to learn that he's not okay. He's not there. And cutting back to show who Kyle is and what happens. You'd have to do really compressed. You'd be doing the moment when he realizes, like, you know, have I done the right thing or have I not, after he realized he passed away. And then have the mother say something to him like, you do the right thing, whatever. And I'm not saying that's better or worse or whatever. I'm saying if you said to me as an experiment, tell this story in 10 pages, how would you do it? You'd find a different structure. You'd still hit the same beats. I'd still show Spider-Man meeting Kyle, Spider-Man deciding to tutor, Spider-Man believing in Kyle, all of it. And how do you compress further? You see what I mean? And when you tell it from the place that gives you the most leeway to shrink is if you tell it from the climax. If you tell it from the point where everything is about to come to a head, you start there, it gives you room to fill in what you need as you go. So if you really need a shrunken story, you can do it that way. I'll show you with another one here. And are you guys following? Is you guys getting it? Do you have any questions? Hit me right now. Like any questions at all?
There's a One quick question. What is the climax of that Daredevil issue that you showed everybody?
Well, for me, the climax is like it's sort of skipped in terms of the climax would essentially be, you know, what happens when they're dragging him in that way. But because of that story, what really you need is for them to sort of absorb the lesson that he was telling that, you know, he doesn't get the whole time. So again, for me, like if I had a little bit more room with that, what I would do is have it be, you know, the kids are dragging him. They realize like they're up a hill, and you know, he says, "Leave me behind," like leave me behind and go ahead, and they don't. Um, they drag him forward. So if I had 5 more pages with that issue, that's what I would do. Do you know what I mean? That's where the climax would happen. But it's hitting enough of those beats of the 3 act structure to fulfill you in that way. You know what I mean? So again, you can say, I'm going to do a story that has most of these things in it. And I'm going to decide I don't really need a big fight or a big battle or a climax in this one, because what's really important is that my hero feels like everything is lost. There's nothing, you know. And then when they come to the other side, they realize the climax is just an internal battle where they wake up and they realize, yeah, actually, you know, I was wrong. And what I thought I was trying to achieve, I have achieved in that way. So it's following this and then deciding, do I have enough to make this a fulfilling story? Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I just, one more question for
Yeah.
now. So is it important to start with the core emotional point to hook readers and set up key emotions slash themes?
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is when you start with the beginning of the story should show your character, not, I think we did this when we did characterization. So if you want to go back, and I think we did a class on that first, how do you present a character to readers in an effective way? But the idea was, or the idea is, you're not saying who this character is. You're almost introducing where this character is in their life um, on the sliding scale of the emotional arc. Okay, what I mean by that is Batman. When I introduce Batman, any story, right? Batman is always awesome. Batman is always, you know, but that's not the point. So, like, name me a story I've done with Batman, and I'll tell you why I introduced him the way I did in that one. Zero Year, okay, or and let me Black Mirror. So, a Court of Owls. That's like I not like I could tell you each one, but
I'm just naming all of your which
sorry, it's my bad for like chat. So, Court of Owls is about Batman realizing that the only way to be Batman in a good way is to be humble, to understand that the city is bigger than him and will always be a mystery to some degree, and letting go of knowing everything, being awesome, you know, in a way that overshadows the kind of mystery and grandeur of Gotham. So, if that's what it's about, what are you going to show him at the beginning as, right? You're going to show him either wrestling with that I'm not good enough and I'm worried about that, or if the story is about him not knowing anything about the threat coming that's going to prove that to him, then the opposite. So what I did was the opposite, right? So I showed him overly confident, taking down all his villains with no problem. From he takes on all of Arkham and he smiles. And the whole refrain of that opening is Gotham is, Gotham is, Gotham is. And what he really believes, even though he doesn't fully admit it, but he's saying it in that opening, is Gotham is Batman. Gotham is, you know, he knows Gotham. He's not worried about what Gotham is because he knows that it's Batman. But it's not. It's everybody else. It's the history. It's everything. And that's what he learns. So what am I showing him as in the beginning? I'm showing him as overconfident and thinking that he knows what Gotham is. That's the point of that opening, right? Okay. And something like um, you know, like Absolute, right? An Absolute Batman right now, just to go from beginning to now, like to where we are in the present. I'm trying to show Batman in the beginning as Alfred again in the opening part. Alfred is the one that's sort of the main character, and he's impressed by Batman to a degree that he becomes idealistic again. So what am I showing Alfred as at the beginning? Jaded. Alfred comes in and he's like, Gotham is, there's even an echo of what are you, Gotham? Well, let's look at you. You're run down, you're hollowed out, you're this. I can't wait to get out of here. There's not anything here. He calls his daughter, he's estranged from his daughter. Well, everything I'm trying to characterize Alfred in those first pages is someone who believes that the only way to survive is to compromise. And that's it. Like everything about him says that. Even the thing where he's like, the guy whose store he goes to get tea at, he's like, he wouldn't really like me if he knew the things I did. Like every line from Alfred is speaking to that. Okay. Does that make sense? So you're characterizing your protagonist in relation to the conflict they're about to face, not characterizing the protagonist in general. It's not Batman is awesome or Spider-Man is, so funny or Superman is so heroic. It's Superman is worried about this, or Superman is overly, you know, um, is overly confident about that, or he doesn't see this thing coming because he's focused on that. Whatever it is, it's setting them up to go against the thing that's about to hit them. You know? Okay. So not worrying. Yes. Okay. So here, let me pull in another story. I'm pulling.
Someone asked in the comments if Alfred is you in this universe, your perspective.
Yes, it's 100% me. Let me see. I think people were saying around an hour and a half is a good length. So I want to make sure everyone can ask questions now quickly. We'll look at a couple more and we can go into it. But is there anything else like from what we're talking about that people are confused about, questions about anything?
Someone was unclear about what the point of no return moment is in the Daredevil issue. Just to clarify that for the viewers.
I have to go back and look again. But the point of no return to me is I think it's when he decides in this kind of, let me say this, and then like if it's not in there, you can go back and accuse me of it. But in this story, the way that a point of no return would function is for Daredevil to decide, I'm down here with these kids. We're not getting back. It's either we go back up to the road or we go forward and try and find help. And he decides we're going forward. And I thought that was in there in some way that he's like, we're going into the snow and we're going to do this. That's the point of no return because if you keep going and you don't find what you're looking for, you're going to die. You know what I mean?
And just quickly, how is that different from the all hope is lost moment?
The all hope is lost moment is when you realize the decision you made is wrong. Like you totally fucked up. So like let's think about like again, Titanic, it's where Rose not only believes that she made a mistake with Jack, but the whole boat is sinking and all that. That's plot. But emotionally, she believes she made a mistake. She fell for this con artist who stole her jewel and whatever it is that, right? So in something like, Moana, that's the moment when she goes up against the lava monster, loses, and Maui's thing breaks, and he's like, I'm out. I'm leaving you. You're done. You're not the right one. You weren't ever the right person to pick. In Die Hard, it's like when he realizes Hans has his wife. He has no way of winning at that point. And the only chance he has is to go up against him and get killed. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like when you've lost everything and there's just no way forward. It's like in Indiana Jones, it's when he gives up when he has the bazooka and then he's like, just tie me up. I'm not going to blow up the ark. That. So it's Disney movies really hit it hard. If we just watched, my kid loves Tangled, my 5-year-old. Have you guys seen that? Tangled is like a perfectly 3-act structure movie where Tangled is when Gothel goes to Rapunzel and is like, see, you were wrong. Flynn Rider never loved you and takes her back to the tower to be like, now you're going to live with us forever, live with me forever and never go anywhere and so on. So, yeah, it's like the point usually in the action movie with John Wick or whatever, where they're like captured, they have nothing and they're totally screwed, and their loved one is now in the clutches of the bad guy. It's like when everything is wrong.
In rom-com, it's when the person is walking in the rain.
In the rom-com, it's when like if you had a ruse to win somebody over, like you pretended to be something or whatever it is, they discovered it and you're fucked and they don't like you anymore. And they've said they'll never be with you again. That's the rom-com version of it. You know what I mean? Where it's like you've said, I don't love you, even though you do. And like you've pushed them away and you'll never win them back. Like that's the all hope is lost. Um, you know? All right. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. All right. So just seriously, just watch some like you know what I mean? Like you can watch Terminator is like when they think they blew up the Terminator and they used all their weapons and they blew up the truck and then he's still alive. Usually, by the way, Act Three is a change of venue also. Like it takes you somewhere else. So you can kind of identify it like, as well, like it's in the idea that it's like usually it takes you to the climax place. It's like, okay, we are now going to do this thing in this other place. So not always, but the act three is like, okay, let's go fight this thing, let's go do this at the end you know okay. um yes, that is, in someone was talking about the Matrix, all hope is lost is when Neo isn't the one and dies. You know what I mean? Or he's told he's not the one by, I haven't seen it in a long time, by the Oracle. Um, yeah,
How would you classify a fake out, like in like Goldfinger, when they think that everyone's been killed off, but then Odd Job shows up at the end and tries to kill them all, or Goldfinger?
that's just plot stuff. It's fun. Like Terminator has like three different endings. James Cameron loves it, where it's like, and I love it too. It's like my favorite, where it's like Aliens has like three different endings, but that can just be plot. The all hope is lost moment in Aliens is like, when uh, they Ripley feels like Newt and she are left alone, and there's nobody there, and the ship isn't coming, and Bishop left them behind, and that's it. And then Act Three, they're on the ship, and then they land somewhere else, and then the climax is there's Alien Queen hit out on the thing. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? It fits. You know what I mean? Terminator 2 follows it really well too, right? Like James Cameron follows three act structure like a beast. It's like, you know. But sometimes, like what I'd say to you too is like you compress sometimes, you expand sometimes. So Act Two usually is the thing that gets smushed. When you're doing comics, I mean, because it's not exactly even when you do. But if you're thinking about last thing, like when you're thinking about like three acts over 6 issues or so, right? Um, like 120 pages. If you have about 6 issues, where is the inciting incident going to fall? Usually towards the end of issue one, right? So Court of Owls follows that structure where the inciting incident is Dick Grayson is accused of being a murderer, and there's the hint that it's the owls. That's the inciting incident. You know what I mean? The owls might exist. Dick Grayson might be a part of this in some way. Act one, the end of Act one happens in issue two, I think. I have to go back and look, where Batman decides he's going to prove there is no Court of Owls and investigate them. You know what I mean? The point of no return happens after he is out of the labyrinth and decides that he is going to go after them, even though he understands what they are at that point. The all hope is lost happens when he goes after them and thinks that he beats them, but feels there's something terribly wrong, and he's never going to get the answers he wants. And they all kill themselves, and he's always going to be left feeling empty. And then Act Three starts when he realizes that Lincoln March is alive and his brother and that, you know what I mean?
Someone asked, can you explain the transition between the inciting incident and the point of no return?
Those are, well, there's no transition there because the inciting incident happens all the way at the beginning, point of no returns in the middle. So the point of no return is probably the one that, you know, is the loosest, the one that, you know, if you're going to skip one, you could probably skip or compress if you have to do in a 20-page issue. But it's usually a moment in a story where what happens is if you have the room to do it, your hero realizes that if I keep going, there's just no turning back from this. Like everything will be different if I continue. And they choose to do it and keep going, even though they know that it will change everything forever. Um, so again, you can use a different, I'm not saying use 3 act structure. Okay. What I'm saying is if you've never heard of any kind of story structure and you want to try one out, this is the one I use. But again, there are a lot of different ones. There's like, again, Robert McKee, there's Save the Cat, there's 9 Point Story, there's like, there's the um oh, Apatow, what's his name? Did the circles? What's the one? The
Dan
circles?
Harmon?
That's right. Dan Harmon did has one that circles where it's like a Venn diagram. So use what's comfortable to you. I'm just trying to show you that you're right, Dan Harmon Story Circle. They're great. Each one of them, they all do the same thing. They're not different. Like they're just they pick the points that they think are important and give them to you and say, you know, these are the emotional beats of your story, and find the most of them that you can. For me, I try and use the one that has the fewest. That's like it's just here's what your character is. Something happens to challenge that, open up a new doorway that's going to make them face the thing they were worried about in that first part. They decide to do it. They go forward. Sometimes in the middle, there's a point where they're like, "Oh my god, if I keep going, this is really going to, be messing my whole life up." But I keep going, and then and then they feel horrible that they made a mistake and they decide no, I haven't. And for me what that does is it gives me, I have my whiteboard over here, like you can see, like I have like a little whiteboard, and what I do is like I do the beats that follow that kind of stuff for my story, and that's it. And then I explore in the middle, like I like to sort of figure out the things in between those signposts. But for me, knowing those beats is core before I start. I have another friend, a very good friend, who if he knows where the story is going, he can't write it. So he has to really explore all of it and not know those beats. He still follows the same kind of structure, but I mean, he just writes it without knowing. For me, I can't start unless I know these things. And that's just my process. Your process might be more like my friend's. But before he starts writing it officially for a comic, he has figured all that out. So what I'm saying is my process to write my scripts is I figure it out on a whiteboard, like what is the inciting incident? What are they going through? What are some of the other layers of the story? And then I start writing. Other people that I know, they start writing and figure it out on second draft, on third draft. And then when they have that third draft where they know, oh, it fits the sort of, it hits the beats I need that make it feel fulfilling, then I hand that in to editorial. You know what I mean? For me, my first draft is usually what I hand in because I've done my prep work beforehand. That's all, you know? So anyway, that's just what I'd say is like, I'm not trying to give homework. But I want you to be the goal. Part of the goal of the class is to be excited to go out and dissect story. Go read a short story. We put Boogeyman in the folder also by Stephen King because it's another example of something I was about to show you, like that is another way of kind of compressing and showing, like telling a story that has all 3 acts but is cut up in a way that allows you to fit it in a short space. But go watch movies. Like TV follows 3 act structure. TV follows 3 act structure in 2 ways. Every episode sort of follows it loosely in its own way, but the season follows it over the course of the whole thing. So if you want, Breaking Bad is like absolutely on that point, you know. So, and some things meander and do different things, you know, episode to episode. But ultimately, when you look at the arc of a season, you will find some version of what 3 act structure or Robert McKee or the 9 point or story circles, you'll find that they hit those beats. Because ultimately all it is beginning, middle, and an end of an emotional arc. It's just character is struggling with something, character has chance to go up against that thing, character decides, even though things are hard, I'm going to keep going, character feels like this is horrible, I've lost, and then decides, no, I'm getting back up and winning, right? That's it. And that's it, you know.
Did you want to look at one more of the comics?
Yeah, let's look at one more. I'm gonna look at two. I'll look at two more really quick. Okay. Here. And please browse the folder as much as you want. Everything is in there. Here. Okay, I'm gonna pull up Detective is interesting because Detective happens again. It's interesting to me. I like it here. Sorry, I'm not trying to, there's so many good stories now. I want to stay till midnight and show you all of them, but I can't, and I don't want you to have to stay that late here. Let me show you I'll show you let me pull up the Conjuring one. That was a late thing. Here we go. It's this one, right? Tales from the, yeah, here. Okay. Share screen.
Was this before Noctera? So these ferrymen had
Yeah, it was before. Yeah, it was before Noctera. I didn't even think of that until you just said it.
And Dennis has done both Noctera and this.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? So anyway, I threw this in there late. It was like a short that I got to do for. I love The Conjuring, and I got invited to do one of a DC like anthology about stories in a DC horror kind of world inspired by that. So essentially, this story is about a guy who is taking a cab to a place where he has it on his GPS. And he's looking, as the story goes, he's like, please take me there. We need to get there. You know what I mean? And everyone I've loved, I've killed. So you need to get me there fast. I don't want to waste a moment. And then when he's telling the story to the guy driving the car, he explains, it goes back to like when he was a kid and somebody in his neighborhood died. And he and his friends dared each other to take the coins off of her eyes, right? Because the idea was that the coins are there in the old tradition for the ferryman when you die to give the ferryman to pass across the river Styx. And so this guy, the main character, does. He steals the coins, right? And then he goes home, he's hanging out as a little kid, and then one night his parents die. They said it was a freak accident, carbon monoxide. Then they don't, I didn't even think about the coin, but it kept happening. Then he's a teenager, right? He gets into a car accident, his friends die. Sometimes years pass, right? Always just enough, just long enough for me to find happiness and joy. He gets married, he has kids, they die. But tonight it all ends, right? He's coming here and he found this. He tracked down the coin. He gave away the coins long ago. After years of research, I found the damn coin. It was a silver dollar commemorative, and he's going to get it, and he's going to like give it back to the guy who buried the old woman, right? Because he feels like the ferryman, the myth of the ferryman, it's out there. The ferryman is real. He's killing all the people that the main character loves, and that. And so he's going there, and what he realizes here in this terrible moment is he's looking at the address, and they get there, it's a smelting plant. It's a place where they melt down metal. And so there's no way of getting the coin because it was melted down and, no longer exists. And then, of course, it can't be, I have to find it. Can you take me somewhere else? And the driver says, anywhere you like, so long as you pay. And he's the ferryman. Okay. Again, this isn't to be like, this is such an amazing story. But what I'm trying to say is sometimes when I'm challenged with this, I think it's 6 pages?
Yeah.
6 pages. So the tiniest story you can do, right? But what I'm trying to say is three act structure, right? Like originally, this is a character who he wants to impress his friends, and he feels as though, you know, there's he's essentially he's afraid of the ferryman, he's afraid of this idea, but he really wants to be like, you know what? I'm brave, and there's no such thing, and that's what he's trying to prove. So what does he do? He takes the coin, right? And then and what happens is, people start dying, so he decides, I'm going to go after this, I'm going to go find this, I'm going to find this coin, I'm going to get it back, I'm going to give it back, and this. So he goes after it. There are things that are, that are skipped again, like there's no sort of point of no return when somebody would be like, you don't want to follow this. That would be the point. I'll show you linearly in a second how it would go. But the major beats are, he gets to the place where he finally thinks the coin is, and he realizes it's a plant where it was melted down. It's all hope is lost, right? So now, if it was a linear story, he would go and be like, I'm still gonna find it, and the ferryman would appear and he would fight him and this. But with this, because it's a really dark story, you can end on the kind of all hope is lost moment, right? Where he's like, there's nothing, oh my God, it's a smelting plant. Well, there has to be a way to find it. That's going towards the climax. And then you're smacked down and you lose in the climax because guess who's in the front seat? The ferryman. It's a mini climax. You know what I'm saying? He makes a move forward. I'm going to go find it. No, you can't because he's there. It goes back. So again, you figure out kind of which things you can shrink, maneuver, whatever. But if I was telling it in a big way, let's say I had three issues to tell it, right? What I would do is the whole first issue would be like him and his friends, him worried about like, I want to prove that there's no such thing as the things I'm afraid of out in the world, right? Like the superstitions. So he takes the coin and that, and it would end with his parents dying, essentially, right? Inciting incident. Something is, something that he not only did it's not what he did, it's the world is saying to him, you just really screwed up, right? Now, second issue, he worries that can't be right. That's the point of resistance before Act One. Then he decides whether it happens again or he just decides, I'm going to go figure it out, right? I'm going to figure it out. Like it can't be this. He goes after it. Over the course of the next issue, every time he makes a step forward trying to find the coin, more people he cares about die. He finds somebody who knows where it is. This would be the point of no return and says you do not want to follow it, you just want to forget it and accept that this is what you're the more you follow it, the worse things are going to happen. Accept that you lost people and that this will keep this is your lot. But instead he goes forward. That's what I do if I had more room, right? So now past the point of no return, he decides, he finally figures out where it is, he's excited, he goes there. It's a smelting factory, all hope is lost. What do I do? Oh my God. Well, you know what? I'm going to figure out what it got put into, and I'm going to find that thing, these pieces of these things, and I'm still going to do it. So he goes to the office of the smelting plant or whatever it is. And who's there but the ferryman is the person who runs the whole place. And even if it's just sort of an illusion and it's a metaphysical being, and he fights that person and he fights over that's the climax. And the guy is like, guess what? Like there's even if you got everything back, you'd never win and this and that, and then he'd lose. So if you did it linearly, it would follow that. But if somebody said to me, you have 6 pages, what did I do? I told it from the all hope is lost moment, right? I told it from the moment right before he realizes there's no hope. Okay. And if you start at a point like that, especially for horror, it allows you to backfill the rest. Okay. You can go back and compress it. So if you have room, you can do the whole linear structure. If you don't have room, usually what you want to do is think about, what am I trying to say? Am I saying something really bleak, which in this story I am? Then I might want to start at the bleakest moment in the structure. I will start at the all hope is lost and I will contain the whole story around that. Even if there's it's very small climax and you lose, right? Everything will be told from that. If you're trying to tell something that's like um, more of a like, you know, uh, uh, a uh, a eulogy, or you're trying to tell something that's more of a like heartfelt drama that's making a point about humanity or whatever it is, then you probably start the way Spider-Man did, right? Towards the end, at the climax or past it, even at the, at the resolution, but towards the climax where everything is kind of coming to a head and you backfill everything to that point. That's what happened there. You know what I mean? So it's kind of figuring out what you're trying to say. If you can't fit it in, and again, there are examples in the folder. There's like the Human Torch story. Again, the Daredevil story is very close to fitting everything in linearly. And then there are other examples like Detective, which starts from a place. It has most of the story has basically like, from sort of inciting incident to here. And some of them I have criticism of as well. Like I would say like the Wolverine story was something I wanted to look at with you and be like, I love that story. But I also feel in retrospect now, a lot later, there are ways of doing it that would give you more of an emotional arc. But what I tried to give you were things that give you different examples of structure, how you fit almost a full thing, almost a full range of this kind of emotional arc in a short space, and trying to give you a sense of the tricks you can use, like starting from one of the main points in 3 act structure, like from point of no return, from all hope is lost, from climax, from the very end, and then sort of tell the other parts as a way of filling in the gaps without needing to spend as much time on all that connective tissue. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to sort of I don't want to keep you guys too long, so I'm trying to sum up. Um,
I had a question. So horror stories could end on all hope is lost.
Well, I'd still argue that if it was just all hope is lost, he'd be like, it's a smelting plant. The end. But the climax of the story emotionally is when your character faces the worst thing they could face, meaning their biggest fear, right? So the biggest fear is not that the coin is gone. What's the biggest fear in the story? That the ferryman is real. That's the climax, right? So the all hope is lost is I'll never find the coin. The climax is I'm facing my biggest fear, the ferryman. You understand? So the all hope is lost in something like, you know, Titanic is the guy I put all my faith in is a fraud. Everything is, I'm going to have to go back to the guy that I hate and live this terrible caged life. The climax is um, he's going to die and I'm going to be all alone and all of this. And as the ship sinks in this, we're not going to make it, that I've made the choice, but now I might lose the person, you know? So that's the thing. The all hope is lost is like, again, I'm not the right person as Moana, right? Or Tangled again, like I made the wrong choice and I should never have left the tower because it only proved everything Gothel said to me, that the world is awful. And then the climax is it's not the world, it's the person I trusted the most is the worst person, is that. Or I'm going up against this thing and the only way to prove to it that the only way to what I have to do to show it that it is not the monster it thinks it is, Moana, is to take the risk and walk over to it and show I am the right person, that Maui was wrong. They're all wrong. I'm the right, hero. You know what I mean? So that, like, and there are seminal things that I love that I would give criticism to of my own of everything, being like, I think they'd be better for hitting some more of that stuff in different ways. So the Wolverine story, just as a kind of side note, what I'd say is like I wanted to use it as an example of showing how the whole thing could happen in the cave if you need it again to compress, like to do one issue where um, you didn't feel like you could fit the whole 3 act structure, you didn't feel like you could fit the whole beginning, middle, and an end, or whatever structure you use, whether it's not 3 act structure or whatever, you couldn't fit the whole story. you could tell the whole thing from Wolverine. That story is about Wolverine, essentially a boy realizes he's a mutant after everybody around him vanishes and dies, and his whole power is that he kills everyone with a horrible acid, and he doesn't even realize it, and has no abilities but that. And he runs away and goes to a cave, and Wolverine comes to kill him. And it's clear that Wolverine is there to kill him because there's no hope for his power. And it ends with Wolverine leaving alone, and you realize Wolverine did do this. It's very dark. And what I wanted to show you is that how I would revamp that story, how you could restructure that story to all happen in the cave and actually make it, in my opinion, like as much as I love it, because it really, I do, like I think it's great, but I think it would be even stronger for filling in a couple of the beats that we're discussing today around what Wolverine was struggling with in some way. That Wolverine worries about being somebody who, he went through the same things this kid goes through. He's supposed to just be a killing machine, and yet he's become something different. So what does he do? Maybe he doesn't kill him. There's a way of doing that so that you can get everything in that story, everything in the whole sort of structure of a long form story in just that cave. But it's an hour and a half, so I don't want to keep anyone longer. Does anyone have any last questions or anything like, anything on your mind about it? So again, like the thesis of the class, just to go home with, is even in a 20-page story, you can tell an entire arc of a character's struggle, entire emotional arc. Sometimes you have the room for your story to tell it linearly. Sometimes it fits, like again with Human Torch, with Daredevil. Sometimes it doesn't quite fit, like Spider-Man. It almost fits. So you tell it from a point of view, like the end, that allows you to cut some stuff out in between those key emotional moments, right? Other times you really don't have enough time, like in the Conjuring the Ferryman story. So you tell all of it from like the moment in that structure that feels the most akin to what the genre is or what you're doing. So horror, all hope is lost, or climax, or whatever. You know, trauma, point of no return, wherever you tell it, whatever. And you backfill or you show everything else in a compressed way. But the goal is to understand these are the core things that make a story feel affecting, to people, that seeing someone struggle with something deeply emotionally and then facing something that represents that, going through that struggle and coming out good, coming out bad, losing the struggle, winning the struggle, whatever that is, that's all a 3 act structure or a story McKee or a 9 things or a story. That's all it is. It's just different ways of kind of looking at it. They're different lenses that you see the same thing through. And again, there are, if you can't fit it because your story is too big, then you've got to think of ways of using one of the points in the story structure that you use or that you like the best. And again, this is mine. And figuring out how to tell the story from one point and then compressing the rest to make it go in there in some way. You know what I mean? That's the thesis, is you can always fit a full emotional arc in something, whether it's 6 pages or it's 20 pages. But the worst thing you can do is be like, oh, I can't fit any of it, so I'm just doing something that is like, a twist or plot or whatever. It needs that emotional structure.
Quick question. After Tarantino was huge, a lot of people try to do the nonlinear storytelling. What to you was like the big mistake that you'd see a lot of times in like the attempts at nonlinear storytelling?
Yeah, can you guys hear that? You could hear Tyler say that or no? He was saying, okay, cool. So I'll give you an example because I thought a lot about this with because I just my 17-year-old and we were just watching Reservoir Dogs the other day, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. So Reservoir Dogs it's like cut up entirely, but if you piece together the story, it actually has like every beat of a 3 act structure. The main character, what is it, Mr.
White?
No, Mr. White's Harvey Keitel. Mr. Orange?
Yeah, it's orange.
Maybe Orange. I don't remember. Um, but he if you think about it linearly, he is a cop who gets an assignment in the movie from his boss to go undercover and then go infiltrate this um, ring, right? This ring of thieves, and he does, and he practices his script to get in there, and he gets in. You know, he gets in with the thieves. They go to do a robbery. It goes bad. Um, they're taken to they go to the warehouse where they're waiting for the boss to show up and tell them what went wrong. And the tension is they feel they were betrayed by somebody, and they don't know who. And the main character, obviously, again, being the undercover cop, this doesn't tell them and has to make the hard choice of saving a police officer from being killed by these thieves. And then when the thieves come back, they kill the police officer, realize it was him, and you get to the third act. You get the climax where Harvey Keitel, who is really feels guilty about this guy getting shot and being wounded, the main character who is hurt in the robbery, has to decide whether or not the main character decides whether or not he tells Harvey Keitel he is the rat. So what I'm saying is all of it, if you line it up linearly, tells a story that follows all of these things: the inciting incident, being invited to bust this ring, end of act one, deciding to do it, right? Infiltrate it. The point of no return, when you actually decide you go on the robbery and he shoots somebody like that, he's one of them. um, then the all hope is lost when they're in the thing, in the place, and he kills everybody with he kills Mr. I think it's Blondes, Mr. Blondes, who's torturing the cop. Now you're into act three, and now he has to decide at the climax, what faces worse fear: do I tell Harvey Keitel I'm the rat, or do I not? And he does tell him, I'm sorry, it was me. And then he dies, essentially. They both die. So anyway, the point is, it is chopped up though. So the beginning of the movie is the main character, Mr. Orange, bleeding in a car with Harvey Keitel on the way to the place, and then it cuts back to after the inciting incident, after the beginning of Act One, where he's already in with the group and they're at a diner talking about nothing right before the robbery, and then it cuts back to imagine you take this linear structure and you slice it into 20 parts, and then you just rearrange the parts in ways that create dramatic tension, create style, create, however you feel is like, but that's what that is. So it's actually it's not something that defies it. And this is the most interesting thing to me is, someone like Tarantino understands it so deeply that you break the rules when you understand the rules, right? So I've done some things, I can name some comics that I've done where I've deliberately gone away from a three act structure, like The Wake, right? Or in some ways where it's like, but the reason you do it is because it's the point of the story in some way. You're trying to show in that book the fact that everything that we think we know about things is wrong. And so you build a structure that, makes you feel uncomfortable as you're reading it, where you're surprised in a way that unsettles you. I'm not saying it works or whatever, but that's the point of trying to do something that defies that structure. With Tarantino, I think when he's creating something like that, like Reservoir Dog, he's trying to shock you into being like, this is a new version of these classic movies that is more violent and visceral, and yet pays homage to these things and that. And so it's almost like a meta commentary on, I am doing a remix of the 70s gangster genre in the 90s. So let's do a remix of the structure as well. So it doesn't feel familiar to you, but it is familiar in that way. You know what I mean? That's kind of, and Pulp Fiction is similar. You can follow Jules's, but some of the beats other people get. And that's what I'd say again about like Avengers movie, the last two Avengers movies. you have a main character, but like Jules is the main character in Pulp Fiction, but some of the other characters get a few of the beats. They get the end of Act One, or they get, and the Russo brothers do that with the Avengers movies too. Anyway, that's like next level stuff for me. I like learning from that, watching that, being like, wow, how'd they do that? But it does still follow that structure. Anyway, any last questions? Anything? I hope this is helpful. These all the stories are there. You can read all of them. Please read short stories, read fiction, go watch short films, go watch regular, and like use this and be like, how do they fit everything in this? How would I tell that? Go watch a movie and be like, how would I tell that movie in 20 pages? How would I do that? You know? That's the ferryman exercise, right? That or the thing I just did. That's the Spider-Man issue. That's the yeah, like you know what I mean? That's do that. Go watch Titanic and be like, what would I do if I or watch whatever and be like, what would I do if I only had 20 pages to tell the story? If I had to do Titanic, I would do it as the ship is about to sink and it's like, what do I do? Or as the she's deciding whether or not to go back on the ship. If I had 40 pages, I do it from the all hope is lost forward. If I had 20 pages, I would do it at the climax while they're on the door and she's remembering everything to that point. If I had 6 pages, you know what I mean? I'd do it as she was rescued. Thing. I don't know. But it's all that. But it would all be there anyway. Okay.
The last question. Have you ever read any comic adaptations of movies that you enjoy that you'd recommend?
Oof, I don't even know what that would be. I don't know if I've read I mean, like the best comic continuation of movies I've ever read were the Aliens Dark Horse books. Those I loved those as a kid. All of the Dark Horse, the Earth War, all of those. That's why it like broke my heart when I saw Alien 3 because I loved Hicks and Newt and to see them dead in the first 5 minutes killed broke my heart. But yeah, the Dark Horse Alien ones were the best continuation of the film thing I've seen in a long time. Anything else? Any last questions?
What do you have coming out later this month that you want to promote?
Oh man, later this month. I just have Absolute Batman and
By a thread.
by a thread, the trade with my son that's out right now.
And then January you have You Won't Feel a Thing.
Yeah, January we have We Won't Feel a Thing from Distillery, which is the new book with Jock. Excited. And yeah, and in January we also have Absolute Batman for Gabriel Walta special issue, and then we have Nick back for 5 and 6. Then we're doing. Did we announce the? Oh, we didn't announce yet. Sorry, 7 and 8. But we're gonna do some cool villains. You're gonna start to see, yeah, some cool villains that you love from Bane to other. I shouldn't say, but from to other people, and it's gonna be good. We're gonna have a blast. Anyway, thank you guys so much. It's great doing. If there's any comments, like any suggest, we're gonna post this tomorrow. You'll have access to it again as free subscribers. Anyone you know that wants to watch it can go see it free. But also, like, if you have any comments about things we could do better, that you want more of, less of in the class, more Q&A, whatever, just let me know. And let me know the topics you want because people really seem to want pitches. Like, how do you pitch a comic? I can do that. We did a version of that with Will Dennis, an editor, a while ago, but I can talk about actual pitches. But just topics that you want, anything you want. I love doing this, so I'm happy to dive in anytime. And again, as a paid subscriber, you'd have um, access to all of our archives entirely, all 30 classes or whatever. And I might do one more. I don't know. I'm enjoying this. There's big audience for free, so it's fun. I don't know. I want you guys to feel like comics or something you can do for fun, for work, for everything. So anyway, all right. Thank you guys so much. Have a good one.